The sun hung high in the sky, casting a golden glow over the battlefield. On one side stood the alien princess, her regal armor gleaming as she lifted her sword with ease. She had fought countless battles, defeated the fiercest warriors, and never once had anyone managed to stand against her. Her reputation spread across the galaxy, and no one dared to challenge her. Today, however, she stood face to face with a human soldier, one who looked far too small and unremarkable for such an intense fight. The princess raised her chin, her eyes filled with arrogance as she scanned the human soldier. "This fight will be very short," she declared, her voice cold and full of certainty. The crowd of alien warriors gathered around the arena watched in silence, waiting for the inevitable victory. The human soldier, clad in standard armor, stood motionless, unshaken by the princess's words. He had no grand reputation, no imposing size, but something about him radiated a quiet confidence. His eyes met hers with calm determination, showing no sign of fear. The princess sneered, her confidence growing. She had heard rumors about human resilience, but she dismissed them as nothing more than stories. Humans were weak, their bodies fragile compared to the might of her people. This would be easy, she had no doubt. With a swift motion, she lunged forward, aiming to strike. Her movements were fast, her speed blurring as she swung the sword down with all her strength. But just as quickly, the human moved, stepping to the side and avoiding her attack. The princess's blade struck the ground with a loud clang, sending sparks flying. The crowd gasped. This was not what they expected. The human soldier had dodged her strike with ease, moving faster than they could have imagined. The princess paused for a moment, her gaze narrowing. She had underestimated him. She spun around, swinging her sword in a wide arc. But once again, the human was gone, his figure a blur as he sidestepped her attack. He was fast, faster than she had anticipated, but that would not stop her. With a growl, she pressed forward, more determined than ever to end this quickly. "You're not fast enough, human," she taunted, her voice dripping with contempt. She launched a series of swift, powerful attacks, each one designed to overpower him. But the human danced around her, dodging and weaving with surprising agility. He never once lost his focus, always staying one step ahead. The princess's frustration grew as the battle dragged on longer than she had ever expected. The princess was strong, but she had never faced anyone who could move like this. This human soldier was no ordinary fighter. He wasn't just avoiding her strikes. He was studying her, waiting for the right moment to strike back. The princess's breath began to quicken as she realized something. This fight might not be as short as she thought. The princess's frustration was growing. Her strikes were powerful, and yet the human continued to avoid them with an ease that seemed impossible. Every time her sword slashed the air, he was already moving, his footwork light and swift. She had expected to crush him within moments, but now, as the seconds ticked by, she began to wonder if this human was more than just a mere soldier. He was fast. Too fast. The princess had never seen anything like it. Her movements, usually so precise and deadly, were being dodged with little effort. And what was worse, the human was beginning to make her look clumsy. She had trained for years, honed her skills in countless battles, and yet here she was, struggling against a single human. "You cannot win, human," the princess said, her voice more forceful now, trying to hide the unease creeping into her chest. She swung her sword again, this time aiming for his chest. But he ducked low, just out of her reach, and kicked the ground hard, launching himself into a roll that brought him behind her. She whipped around, but before she could react, the human soldier had already moved. He was too quick. He lunged at her with a series of strikes aimed at her exposed side. The princess barely managed to parry the first two blows, but the third one grazed her armor. It was just a scratch, but the feeling of it was enough to shake her. This human was not just surviving. He was fighting back. Her breathing was heavier now, her confidence beginning to crack. She had never faced a warrior like this. Every time she thought she had him cornered, he was gone, his movements too fast for her to follow. She growled in frustration and swung her sword harder, putting all her strength into the next blow. But once again, the human sidestepped her attack, his face calm, his eyes focused. He wasn't afraid. That much was clear. He didn't even seem to be trying to defeat her with raw strength, but rather with his mind. His ability to predict her movements, to understand her fighting style, and counter it. He was like a shadow, always one step ahead. The princess felt something in her shift. She had always been the strongest, the one others feared. But here, on this battlefield, with this human, she was starting to feel vulnerable. He wasn't like the others she had defeated. He was clever, resourceful, and it was becoming clear to her that this fight might not end the way she had imagined. "Why do you fight so hard?" the princess asked, a hint of curiosity creeping into her voice. She had never fought someone who didn't just fight for survival, but seemed to be enjoying the challenge. The human soldier didn't respond. He didn't need to. He just kept moving, always staying just out of reach, and every so often, landing a hit that made her realize this fight was no longer a one-sided affair. As the battle raged on, the princess began to feel a sense of respect, something she hadn't expected. The human was forcing her to fight harder than she ever had before, and in doing so, he was making her question everything she thought she knew about strength. The princess' heart raced, her sword arm growing heavier with each passing second. She had never felt so out of control. Every time she tried to land a blow, the human danced around her like a shadow, his movements precise, almost effortless. Her strikes, which had crushed countless opponents in the past, were being dodged or blocked. The once confident princess now found herself struggling just to keep up. She gritted her teeth and tightened her grip on the hilt of her blade. "You are stronger than I thought, human," she muttered under her breath. She couldn't let him see her falter. She was the princess, the undefeated warrior. She had built her reputation on her strength and skill. Her people expected nothing less than victory. But this human, this soldier had no fear. His eyes never wavered, his stance unbroken, as if the thought of losing was foreign to him. It made her blood boil. She had seen entire armies cower before her, and now she was the one being tested by a single human soldier. The thought of it stung her pride more than she cared to admit. The crowd of alien warriors stood in stunned silence, watching the battle unfold. They had never seen their princess so outmatched. Some whispered among themselves, unsure of what to think. The princess' reputation was legendary. Her name alone was enough to make enemies tremble. But now, the human was proving that even the greatest warriors could be beaten. The princess took a deep breath and focused. Her pride was on the line. She couldn't let this human embarrass her. With a roar, she launched herself at him again, faster this time. The speed of her assault was blinding, and for a moment, the human soldier stumbled, caught off guard by her sudden intensity. But he recovered quickly. He sidestepped her strike, ducked under her next one, and spun around, sweeping her legs out from under her. The princess hit the ground with a heavy thud, the air knocked out of her chest. For the first time in the fight, she felt vulnerable. Her armor, once a symbol of invincibility, now felt heavy and suffocating. The human soldier stood over her, offering his hand to help her up. His expression was calm, almost respectful, but there was no mocking smile, no sign of arrogance. The princess stared at his outstretched hand for a moment before pushing it away and rising to her feet on her own. "I'm not done yet," she growled. Her pride refused to let her admit defeat. She was not going to fall to this human. With renewed determination, she attacked again, her movements sharp and brutal. But the human was ready. He met her head-on, blocking her strikes with a series of well-timed parries. For the first time, the princess felt herself tiring. Her movements were no longer as fluid, her attacks less powerful. The human soldier had not only matched her strength, but had outlasted her endurance. The princess' pride, once unshakable, now felt like a weight on her shoulders. She realized she had underestimated him, not just as a fighter, but as a warrior in his own right. Her pride had blinded her to the truth. She wasn't invincible. Not anymore. The realization hit her hard. She might lose this fight. The princess' confidence was beginning to crack. Her once smooth and powerful strikes were now sluggish and predictable. She could feel the sweat dripping down her face, her breath coming in heavy gasps. The human soldier was relentless, and despite her best efforts, he was still managing to stay one step ahead. Her mind raced. She had faced powerful foes before, but this human was different. His strategy, his movement, the way he predicted her attacks, it was all so precise. It was as if he had studied her every move, waiting for the right moment to strike back. The princess swung her sword, hoping to land a blow that would finally end the battle. But the human moved again, dodging with such ease that it almost seemed like he was reading her mind. She missed by inches, and before she could recover, he was already behind her. He didn't strike, though. Instead, he just stood there, his calm presence almost mocking her frantic movements. "You're good, human," she panted, her voice dripping with frustration. "But you're still too weak." The human didn't respond, but there was something in his eyes, a look that told her he wasn't intimidated. He wasn't afraid of her strength, her reputation. She had seen that look before in the eyes of warriors who believed in their own skill, their own resilience. It was a look of determination. And now, that determination was aimed at her. The princess' heart pounded in her chest as she realized just how badly she had underestimated him. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for respect. And the human was proving, in ways she couldn't deny, that he had earned it. The princess' pride surged, pushing her to attack once more. She lunged forward with everything she had left, determined to end this now. She swung her blade in a wide arc, but the human was ready. This time, he didn't dodge. Instead, he closed the distance between them, grabbing her wrist in a flash and using her own momentum against her. In a single fluid motion, he twisted her arm and forced her sword to the ground. The princess stumbled, off balance. In that moment, she felt a rush of panic, something she had never experienced in battle. She had always been in control. She had always been the one to command the fight. But now, as she struggled to regain her footing, the human soldier stood over her, calm and unyielding. He had turned the tide of the battle in an instant. Her pride was shattered. She had been so sure of her victory, so certain that no one could defeat her. But the human had done the impossible. He had made her doubt herself. And now, as she found herself vulnerable and cornered, she knew the truth. This fight was no longer hers to win. For the first time, the princess looked at the human with something other than disdain. She didn't see a weak soldier anymore. She saw a warrior, a true fighter who had earned his place on the battlefield. She took a step back, breathing heavily. This fight, "It's not over yet," she muttered, but the human's unflinching gaze told her everything. He was ready for whatever came next. The princess stood back, her chest rising and falling with each heavy breath. Her sword was still gripped tightly in her hand, but now it felt heavier than before. The human soldier, his stance steady and unwavering, watched her carefully, waiting for the next move. The confidence that once radiated from her had been replaced by doubt, and she could no longer ignore it. The arena, once filled with the sounds of cheers and jeers, had gone eerily quiet. The alien warriors, who had gathered to witness her easy victory, now stared in stunned silence. This was not the fight they had expected. The princess, their mighty champion, was being pushed to the edge by a single human soldier. "You should have surrendered," the princess muttered through clenched teeth, her eyes narrowing. Her pride was at stake, and she couldn't afford to lose. "I won't let you humiliate me." The human didn't respond. His eyes locked on hers. He was calm, too calm. There was no arrogance in his gaze, no overconfidence. He was just focused, waiting for her to make the next move. And that was what troubled her. She had spent her entire life training, becoming the fiercest warrior in her galaxy. She had defeated countless enemies with ease. But here, against this human, she felt as though she was fighting with one hand tied behind her back. No matter how fast or strong she was, he was always there, one step ahead. With a snarl, the princess lunged forward, aiming to finish the fight once and for all. She swung her sword with all her strength, hoping to land a decisive blow. But once again, the human dodged. He moved so quickly, so smoothly, that it was as if he had anticipated her every move. He was no longer just avoiding her strikes. He was using them to his advantage. Before she could react, he countered. In a flash, he seized her sword arm, twisting it and forcing her to the ground. The princess crashed into the dirt with a grunt, the impact sending a shockwave through her body. For the first time in the fight, she found herself on the ground, completely exposed. She gasped, struggling to regain her breath as she tried to push herself up. But the human was faster. He was already standing above her, his eyes watching her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. The princess' heart raced as she realized how close she was to losing. This wasn't just about her pride anymore. She was about to be defeated by a human soldier, someone she had once thought was beneath her. Her mind raced, desperately searching for a way to turn the tide back in her favor. But the human wasn't giving her a chance. He was methodical in his movements, never rushing, always patient. He was waiting for her to make a mistake, and with every passing second, she could feel herself growing weaker. The princess' sword lay a few feet away from her, just out of reach. Her body ached, every muscle protesting, every breath labored. She had underestimated him from the start, and now it seemed like it was too late to change the outcome. The crowd held its breath as the princess slowly rose to her feet, trying to summon whatever strength she had left. The human, however, was already poised, ready for the next move. The battle had reached its peak, and neither side was willing to back down. The princess stood tall, but her legs felt weak. Sweat streamed down her face, mixing with the dirt from the battlefield. Her armor, once shining and proud, now seemed heavier with each passing second. She could feel the human soldier's gaze on her, his presence steady and unwavering. It was as though he had already won, even though the fight was far from over. Her mind raced. She had always been the one in control. Her strength, her speed, her skill, it had made her feared across the galaxy. No one ever questioned her abilities, and yet here she was, struggling against a single human. He had taken her by surprise, and now she was paying the price. She tightened her grip on her sword. If she was going to win, she would need to summon every ounce of strength she had left. She couldn't afford to lose. Not now. Not in front of her people. With a roar, the princess lunged again, her sword aimed at the human's chest. This time, she would not hold back. She poured everything she had into the strike, her muscles straining, her body screaming in protest. But the human moved again, faster than she expected, sidestepping the blow with ease. He wasn't just avoiding her attacks. He was predicting them. It was as if he knew exactly what she was going to do before she did it. The princess could feel the frustration building up inside her. She had underestimated him, but now she couldn't afford to make the same mistake again. "Why won't you give up?" She spat, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "What do you want from me?" The human soldier didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes told her everything. He wasn't fighting for glory, for pride, or for victory. He was fighting because it was his duty, because he believed he could win. And that belief was stronger than any weapon she had ever known. The princess took a step back, trying to catch her breath. Her movements were slowing, her mind clouded with doubt. This wasn't just a battle of strength anymore. It was a battle of willpower, and the human was winning. She glanced at her sword, still gripped tightly in her hand. It had served her well, but now it felt like a burden. Every swing was becoming more difficult. Every step felt like it was dragging her down. The human, still calm and composed, waited for her next move. He wasn't overconfident, but he wasn't afraid either. He had faced worse battles, and he knew how to survive. The princess, on the other hand, was facing something she had never encountered before: her own limits. For the first time in her life, she was not the strongest being in the room. The princess's mind flashed to the faces of her people, her warriors, her subjects. They had watched her fight. They had believed in her. She couldn't fail them. She couldn't show weakness. But the more she tried to push herself, the more she realized how tired she was. The princess felt a strange feeling deep inside, a mix of respect for the human soldier and something else. Fear. Fear that she might not win. Fear that she had finally met her match. The princess stood still, her chest heaving as she tried to steady her breath. Her body ached, and her mind struggled to keep up. She had been in battles before, countless battles where she was always the victor, but this was different. This human soldier, though smaller and less powerful, was relentless. He had pushed her to her limits, and now she wasn't sure how much more she could take. She glanced at him, watching as he stood across from her, calm and focused. His eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, the princess saw something she hadn't expected: respect. He wasn't mocking her or gloating. He wasn't even breathing heavily. He had remained steady, unshaken, through it all. It was in that moment that the princess felt the shift. It was small, but it was there. The human wasn't just a soldier. He was a warrior, one who fought not for glory or fame, but because it was his nature to endure. He had faced danger head-on without hesitation, and with each strike he made, he had shown the princess that there was more to strength than physical power. There was something deeper, something in the heart and mind that made a warrior truly great. The princess couldn't help but feel a pang of respect for him. She had always been the one to dominate, the one who was feared. But here, in the dust and dirt of this battlefield, it was the human who had captured her attention. His resolve, his quiet strength, it was unlike anything she had ever seen. She took a step back, her sword lowered slightly. The human didn't move, but his eyes never left hers. He had been patient throughout the fight, never rushing, never making a careless mistake. And now, as she struggled to find the strength to continue, she realized something. She might not win this fight. For the first time in her life, she wasn't sure of the outcome. The princess glanced around the arena. The alien warriors were still watching, their faces filled with uncertainty. They had never seen their princess lose a fight. They had never even seen her struggle. But now, they were witnessing something different. The princess, their symbol of invincibility, was no longer certain of her victory. Her pride, once a shield, now felt like a burden. She had spent so much of her life relying on her strength, on her skill with the sword. But this fight had shown her that strength alone wasn't enough. It wasn't the sword or the armor that made a warrior great. It was something more. It was the will to keep going, no matter how hard the fight became. The princess looked at the human again, this time without disdain or arrogance. She saw him for what he truly was, a warrior who fought not for the glory of victory, but for the honor of the challenge itself. And in that moment, she realized that no matter who won this fight, she had already learned something invaluable. "You fight well," she said, her voice hoarse but sincere. She didn't know if the human could hear the respect in her words, but she hoped he could. She had never admitted such a thing before, and the words felt strange on her tongue. But they were the truth. The human soldier nodded but didn't speak. He didn't need to. His actions had already spoken louder than words ever could. The battle was over, but the air was thick with tension. The princess stood tall, but her sword now felt like an empty weight in her hand. She had fought fiercely, using every ounce of her skill and strength. But now, as she looked at the human soldier standing before her, she knew the truth. She had lost. She had never experienced a defeat like this. It wasn't just the physical exhaustion or the pain in her limbs. It was the feeling of being outmatched in a way she couldn't control. This human had forced her to fight harder than she ever had before, and in the end, he had been the one to survive. Not because of luck or sheer strength, but because of his mind, his patience, and his relentless will. The princess could feel the weight of her people's gaze on her. The alien warriors who had watched the fight in silence now shifted nervously. The princess was the symbol of their strength, their power. And now she had been bested by a single human soldier. Her pride screamed, but she kept it in check. It was hard to admit, but the human had earned her respect. There had been moments in the fight when she thought she had him cornered, only for him to slip away or counter her attacks with a level of skill that had left her stunned. She had underestimated him, and in the end, it was her pride that had cost her the battle. The human stepped forward, his face calm, his body not showing signs of the strain the princess felt. He didn't boast, didn't revel in his victory. He just stood there, watching her, waiting. The respect in his eyes matched the respect she had begun to feel for him. He hadn't taken advantage of her weakness or tried to humiliate her. He had fought honorably, and for that, the princess knew she could not be angry. "You are a true warrior," the princess said quietly, her voice hoarse but filled with sincerity. She didn't expect him to reply, but she needed him to hear the truth. She had spent so long thinking she was the best, but now she understood that there was more to being strong than just physical power. The human nodded, his eyes showing no trace of arrogance or triumph. He simply accepted her words as they were, truth, no more and no less. The princess glanced around at the watching warriors, their faces filled with awe and disbelief. They had seen their princess struggle, but none of them had ever imagined they would see her fall. She straightened her back, gathering her strength. She might have lost this fight, but she had learned something valuable, something that would change her. Her warriors, her people, they were still watching her. And though she had lost the battle, she was still their leader. She could not let this defeat define her. She would grow stronger, learn from her mistakes, and come back better. Not just for herself, but for them. "I may have lost today," the princess continued, "but this is not the end. This fight has shown me that strength is not just about power. It is about the will to keep going, the courage to face what lies ahead, and the wisdom to learn from those who challenge us." The human soldier gave her one final nod before stepping back. The fight was over. But for the princess, it had been the beginning of something new. A new understanding, a new respect, and a new path forward. As the princess turned to face her people, she knew that her journey was far from over. She had lost the battle, but she would not lose the war. The lessons she had learned today would shape her future, and in time she would rise again, stronger than ever. The arena was silent as the princess stood tall, her body bruised but her spirit still strong. She had lost the fight, but in some ways she had gained something far more important. Her eyes, once filled with arrogance and pride, now held a new understanding. The human soldier had shown her a strength beyond anything she had ever known. She took a deep breath, her heart still racing from the battle. She was not used to feeling vulnerable, not used to admitting when she was wrong. But today, she had learned a valuable lesson. Strength was not only about power. It was about adaptability, intelligence, and humility. It was about learning when to fight and when to let go. The human soldier stood at a distance, watching her, his posture relaxed but ready. He had not gloatingly celebrated his victory. He had not rubbed her defeat in her face. He had simply fought, and in doing so, had earned her respect in a way no other warrior ever had. The princess lowered her sword, the weight of it no longer as overwhelming as before. It was time to change the course of this battle, to turn it into something more than just a fight. She had been defeated, yes, but now she wanted to learn from the one who had bested her. She took a step toward the human. "You have proven yourself," she said, her voice steady, though tinged with the weariness of the battle. "I see now that I was wrong to underestimate you." The human nodded, but said nothing. He didn't need to speak. His eyes already conveyed all that was needed. There was no pride in his gaze, only quiet acknowledgement. It was the same look he had given her throughout the battle, one of respect and calm focus. The princess stood before him, her mind racing. She had never imagined such a moment. She had always been the one others looked up to, the one who inspired fear and admiration. But today, she had been humbled. And yet there was something about that humility that felt like a new strength. Perhaps there was more to leadership than just being the strongest. "I want to learn from you," the princess said, surprising even herself. The words were difficult, but necessary. Not just as a warrior, but as a leader. You fought with more than just strength. You fought with wisdom, with patience, and that is something I need to understand. The human soldier did not hesitate. "We can learn from each other," he said quietly. "That's how we grow stronger. Together." The princess was taken aback. He was right. She had never considered the value of learning from others. She had always been taught that strength meant dominance. But now, with the human soldier standing before her, she saw the truth. Strength could come in many forms, and sometimes it meant working together. "You have my respect," the princess said, her voice filled with sincerity. "And I want to offer you something in return. I want us to work together, to build an alliance. We can achieve more if we combine our strengths." The human soldier finally spoke, his tone calm and sure. "An alliance between us could change everything. We can face challenges together, learn from each other, and fight as one." For the first time in the battle, the princess smiled. It was small, but it was genuine. This wasn't just the beginning of a new alliance between them. It was the beginning of something much greater. She had not only learned from her defeat, but she had also found a new path forward, one where strength was not about standing alone, but about standing together. The princess extended her hand, and the human took it. In that simple gesture, a bond was formed, one built on mutual respect and understanding. And with that, the princess knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she was no longer alone. The battle was over, but its impact would last far beyond the arena. The princess and the human soldier, once opponents, now stood together in the heart of the battlefield, a new understanding between them. The air still buzzed with the energy of the fight, but there was a different kind of tension now, a tension filled with the potential for something greater. They had been enemies, but now they were allies, bound by mutual respect and a shared desire for something more than just power. The princess looked around at the gathering of alien warriors. Their faces, once filled with confidence and certainty, now showed a mix of confusion and awe. They had never seen their princess defeated, never imagined that the mighty warrior who had always led them to victory would fall before a human. But now, as they watched her stand side by side with the soldier who had bested her, something new was beginning to form. A leader was not just defined by strength. The princess had learned that today. She had spent so much of her life focused on power, on domination, on being the one everyone looked up to. But now, she understood that true strength came from something deeper. It came from the ability to learn, to adapt, and to work with others, even when they were different. The human soldier had shown her that. He had not sought glory. He had not fought for fame. He had fought because it was the right thing to do. And in doing so, he had proven that strength was not about being the strongest. It was about being the most capable, the most resilient, and the most willing to learn from others. "I may have lost the fight," the princess said, her voice strong, but filled with the quiet humility that had settled into her heart. "But I have gained something far more valuable. I have learned what it truly means to be a leader, to be a warrior." The human soldier nodded, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He had known all along that this fight wasn't just about winning. It was about understanding each other, respecting each other's strengths, and coming together to create something stronger than either could have done alone. The princess turned to face her warriors. "This is not a defeat," she continued, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "This is the beginning of a new era, a time where we, as a people, grow stronger not by conquering others, but by learning from those who are different from us. We will not rely on power alone. We will rely on our minds, our hearts, and our ability to adapt. The warriors were silent, processing her words. Slowly, some of them began to nod, understanding what she was saying. This was a new path, a path that embraced cooperation, respect, and the wisdom of others. It was a path that would take time to walk, but the princess was confident that it was the right one. The human soldier stepped forward, his eyes meeting hers. "Together," he said simply. The princess extended her hand, the weight of it heavier than any sword. The human took it without hesitation, and in that moment, they both knew that their alliance was not just for this battle, but for the future. As the sun began to set over the battlefield, casting a golden light on the two figures standing side by side, it felt as though a new world was beginning to take shape. A world where strength was defined not by dominance, but by the courage to stand together, to learn, and to grow. The princess had lost the fight, but she had won something far more important: the chance to build a future with those she had once seen as enemies. And with that, a new era began, one where humanity and her people would walk side by side, united in their strength, their wisdom, and their shared vision for the future.